What is up, Jabronis? JJ back here from Run Pure Bets, talking a little bit of Monday Night Football. Obviously, Father Time not present, still recovering probably from Tahoe. Lucky him, right? How rich. Um, I'll be honest, guys. Like, so bowl games end today. I hit slightly above 50%. I think actually exact numbers where I was 3 games over 500. Nothing to write home about. Some really tilting stuff as well, which it is what it is in terms of some of these games. But you just ride it out. So like the end of the season, like the end of the season is now, or the end of the bowl season is basically here. Obviously, we got the big national championship game. Um, but other than that, I mean, look, a fun weekend of college football games, right? I mean, one good game after another, especially the two late ones. Um, yeah, I mean, Michigan. I guess Harbaugh's kind of playing with house money at this point, right? Like, um, because you could figure a guy like him to let that happen the way it did in that game, it had to be kind of tilting. I mean, I know obviously you hate to Nick. No, he won't make it for this show. Usually, like um, in those games, like they get gifted basically what a 1 yard touchdown or whatever they had because the big run from Edwards. Um, and the the play calling inside the 5 was pretty crazy. And then they get gifted, well, not gifted, the weird play call that got reversed, and they hand off to a fullback, not to a fullback, excuse me, a defensive linebacker. And so it's not crazy that the timing was off. I just don't like it. Didn't even make sense. Credit to TCU, who's played above their pay grade all year long. And yeah, I mean, look, let's be honest. Like you look at what transpired in that game, they had a few extra things go their way. Two pick sixes, right? Two stops for Michigan inside, the TCU 2 yard line. So obviously a game could have went a few different ways, but credit to TCU. But again, the Michigan coaching, phew, woof. I mean, sure, McCarthy has to eat the interceptions, of course, but let's be honest, McCarthy's never really been a guy that you feel confident is going to bring you back from a lead. I mean, the fact that they even were still in contention in that game was kind of crazy. And then the Ohio State game, look, pretty crazy. My guy Harrison's kid, well, I said on the early college football show, just a lock. I mean, I know his price scared some people off. He ended up only being like 25% in the higher up stuff, and I think he was less than that in the lower stuff. I mean, I said on the show, just lock him in. Like a game like that, he was gonna play. He was gonna play out, assuming he didn't get hurt, and he was studying out and then got hurt. On a, I guess, potential targeting call that wasn't. But needless to say, credit to Georgia as well, right? The fight back. What a timeout call by Kirby Smart. Um, but yeah, I mean, look, I think that a lot of people didn't think for whatever reason Ohio State wasn't a good team. I mean, what are you like? You crazy? Like if you've watched Ohio State play one game this year, obviously if it was the wrong game, you would have those thoughts. But teams got NFL talent all over the roster. So no, it was good games overall. Georgia TCU is not exactly the matchup I'd want to see personally in the finals. But look, again, TCU just kind of felt like a team of fate. Um, and we'll see. Georgia's defense has definitely been a little overrated this year. So like I said, we'll just have to see. But I know it's 14. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like a national championship game where the home team's a 2 touchdown. I mean, the home team, the favorite's a 2 touchdown favorite. Like so blah, so blah. Um, but it is what it is. Like think about if there was a Super Bowl played, right? And your Super Bowl potential winner was a 14-point favorite. Hasn't happened often. I know for a fact it happened when the Patriots played the Giants during that undefeated season for the Patriots. And I know the Giants ended up winning outright, but I just can't imagine consistently you want to see a national championship game where a team is a double digit or a double touchdown favorite. Just doesn't seem right. But needless to say, let's talk a little football, right? And Minnesota yesterday, my team, right? But here's the thing: like I'm a realist. Like they're not. It's not that they're not good. It's just that they're not nearly as good as the record says they are. Right. So Namath plus 17, love it. So a game like that to me, I don't really care. Like, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not. But again, I don't consider myself a fanatic. I don't lose sleep with Minnesota when Minnesota loses games. But to me, they had this loss coming. Like I was watching the game with one of my cousins, and He was like, "Man, this loss has got to hurt." I'm like, "No, it doesn't, because we've won like 10 games that we shouldn't have." So I mean, am I even allowed to? Is anybody even allowed to complain when the Vikings lose a game like that? They've literally won easily, no matter how you draw it up, easily 5 or 6 games on their schedule. They won that they should not have won. Okay. So yeah, I mean, now that the goal is to hold, well, now it looks like as the three, it looks like they'll get the Giants, which I've said this for the last few weeks. Like, that's the perfect matchup. Whether the Vikings win or lose against the Giants, we couldn't Vikings couldn't ask to play a better team in Minnesota. But the idea that they're gonna have to travel to play the Niners or travel to play the Eagles, just not ideal. Not ideal. Or the Cowboys, I guess, right? Because now the Eagles potentially could blow it, but that would make no sense. The Giants shouldn't even play anybody this week against the Eagles. So, um, but I guess you never know, right? Crazier things have happened. So yeah, overall fun slate, right? And even on the DFS side, for folks that play, God, it's so tilting on that end too. I play Brady every week. I hand build usually 12 to 15 lineups. A Brady stack is almost always in one of them. Just one lineup. I don't go crazy, but I do always have a Brady stack. Whenever I run Brady, you have to run him with Evans. If you're ever building Brady lineups and you're not building it with Evans, I mean, what are you doing? Like, your Brady lineup should always have Evans, because Evans is the explosive guy. If Brady's going to nuke, Evans is going to nuke. It's really just how it works, unless he gets hurt. But then I'd argue Brady's likely not going to nuke anyway. Um, yeah, price at 6,100, just not a great play for me as far as projections. And of course, this is the week he nukes with Evans and Godwin, and the easy run back with Moore. Just yeah, not ideal on that front. But so look, let's talk a little Monday Night Football. Probably the best, at least pregame, the best Monday Night Football game of the year, right? I mean, I know that it's later in the year, but um, Bills, Bengals, really fighting for. I guess they're both fighting for a 1 seed, right? Or either way, this is big for home field advantage. This is they're close enough where it matters. And what do you got the line now? 2.5, right? If I could be mistaken, let me just look. So current line, I think it's 50.5, 2.5, just loading up. It's up to 51, 2.5. So I will tell you this, and this might come off a little chalky, but as we've been saying all year, like, these same game teasers have been so profitable on DraftKings. Um, and if you're not limited at all, which I just can't imagine they're limiting many people on teasers specifically, but if you've been, and especially in the NFL, like, they'll typically take teaser money from anybody. Um, but regardless, yeah, for me, I think you push the Bengals to 8.5 and 43.5 over. So that was what I fired on at DK. You could go the other way in terms of the under. I just, to me, unless you have like a bunch of red zone turnovers, which is something Josh Allen is prone to do, um, I just how does a game like this end 17-14, right? Explosive offenses on both ends, big plays on both ends. Now, I get it. Bengals have had such an underrated pass defense all year, and the Bills don't really run the football well. So, you would think, just based on that alone, the Bills would struggle a little bit offensively. And as for the Bengals, what's been weird with them is sometimes they just kind of like sleepwalk early in games. Um, but they've shown that they can come back, and they've also shown that they can blow a lead. I mean, they almost lost, right? Was it last week where they had a 22-0 lead or 21-0 lead, and that evaporated in the third or fourth quarter? But here, should be just, again, a clash of the AFC without the Chiefs. So for me, like I said, I fired on that over. What's up, Wes? Happy New Year. What's up, Manny? Eric, Viper, John Chow, Greg, Chris. Happy New Year, Chris. Just like when I was at Oklahoma, all flash, no defense. Yeah, if you're talking, so you're talking about USC, Brian. Look, their defense has been terrible all year. I never understand it. Like, Nick Saban kind of figured that out. Not to, sorry to go off tangent again, but Nick Saban kind of figured that out, like at Alabama, where if he just focuses on the defense and hires one of the better offensive coordinators in the country, and just doesn't even worry about offense, it's pretty explosive. Like, he started doing that with who's the trendy coach? Everybody, Lane Kiffin. So when he brought in Lane Kiffin to run the offense, about, what was that, 6-7 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago, whatever it is, Alabama went from winning games like 24-3 to winning games like 58-7, and then it just kind of went from there. I know then he got Sarkisian, and now he's got that idiot that coached the Texans. I think Brian, I forgot what his name is, but I know he used to coach the Texans. And their offense hasn't been as good. Now, they've dealt with some injuries as well, so it's not all their fault. But Needless to say, like on the Kiffin end, it's pretty clear. Not Kiffin on the Lincoln Riley end, it's pretty clear he's not worrying about defense at all. Despite having decent recruits, why not just go scouring for the best defensive coordinator in the country? And look, if and here's the thing, like that's got to be a job that's such an easy sell. Number one, you're going to go to one of the better schools in the entire country to call defensive plays for, and number two, what do you have to do to elevate that defense? Almost nothing. If you're USC, like what do you have to do? The USC in terms of yards per play, points per play, this is like a bottom 10 defense in all of D1 football. All of D1. Bill O'Brien, you got it, Chris. What's up, Mark? Happy New Year. What's up, Danny? Brockwater, Backwater. So for me, if you're Lincoln Riley, I don't know. Again, I'm no expert in hiring coaches and whatnot, but like if you're Lincoln Riley, why are you not scouring for one of the better defensive minds in the country to run all your entire defense from? Because this year for them was absolutely pathetic. Now, granted, we'll give him a few extra years to figure things out, but he's going to get good recruits. It's just inexcusable. He did the same thing at Oklahoma. He had all these great offenses and never played defense. So I just, to me, college, especially more than the NFL, is such a coach's league. Just get somebody that really knows defenses really well. Bring them aboard and just hand the keys over to the defense and let Lincoln Riley do his thing on offense. Like I said, to me, it's the exact opposite of what Saban did. Saban did this 6, 7 years ago, and it's worked. Now Georgia, ironically enough, just seemingly just recruits like just the cream of the crop every year. Um, but I know Bama's had the best recruiting class for this upcoming year. So kudos to Saban there. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on the whole Riley situation with USC. Um, to me, he's just starting to show a lot of flashes of Cliff Kingsbury, where it's like cool, really gimmicky with the offensive stuff, but defense is just a clown show. But all right, so back to this game. So I think you have a few options in terms of betting this game. Hold on. Wow, that's really weird. So I'll say this, and I guess it's because 28. Wow, that's really weird. So just so you guys know, so I have the under 54.5 in this college game, Penn State Utah. It's at halftime. The live line's 52.5, which I do find kind of odd because like realistically, this line should be 54.5 or 55.5 because now I get it. This game really paced slow and the yardage wasn't there. So like maybe you make the argument that there shouldn't even have been 28 points in the first half. And I know that they make the line based, but the pregame line was 54.5. I know that there was some late game news with certain people on the offense being out, offensive linemen especially. That just doesn't make sense. That just seems so low, all things considered, because that should be 3 points higher, just based on intrinsic value alone. I mean, you also have I guess a very slight backdoor shot at overtime. Yeah, I don't necessarily understand that line. But needless to say, 52.5, it's actually, worse than I got pregame despite the first half going over. All right. So Thursday, let me just pull up this game. So let me ask the chat this. How many of you guys are running currently same game parlays on these big games? Like, because I'm happy to draw you up like a 4 or 5 game, same game parlay. I'm going to be clear. I mean, I could fire on it for shits and giggles, but I don't usually, I mean, the same game parlays I do, or max, I did a 3-teamer on Thursday, which was the most I've done all season. Because I didn't want to pay -1. I didn't want to pay -175 for the 2 pairs. And Zeke under the rushing number just seemed like, I don't want to say free money, but he would have had to break a run to get there. And obviously he didn't. And I think he came up half the yardage short, to be honest. But tonight's interesting, right? So in a game where you would figure there would be points, I'll be honest, like, let me just see something real quick. So I did fire because I thought the number was about 15 cents off on FanDuel for Jamar Chase to score a touchdown tonight. I know that line that probably comes off a little chalky, right? I will say this though. Wow, does our friend Stephon Diggs make a lot of sense to score tonight? Let me just see where I can get the best price. So it's always in these big games, right, where these big players step up, right? You see it with Burrow all the time, right? Big game Burrow and whatnot, and big balls Burrow, whatever you want to refer to it as. He always plays really. Seems to always play well when the lights are the brightest. On the other end, though, so Stephon Diggs -105 on FanDuel. I will be completely honest. That's such a smash. Like, and here's why it's a smash. And like, I didn't realize that line was that cheap. So yeah, I'm just firing on that while I'm doing this video. Sorry to be that guy. Because here's why it makes a lot of sense. Now, granted, of course, he can get hurt. But Stefon Diggs, first of all, hasn't scored in 3 straight games, which impacts this number, right? In a negative way. Well, positive way if you're betting it. Negative way as far as the numbers, the value goes down. Um, that line should be up past 130 in my opinion, and here's why. Stephon Diggs most weeks to score, if you rewound 3 weeks ago, Stephon Diggs to score is almost always minus 130, minus 135, because it's hard to trust the Bills' backfield to score between Singletary. Now they're running Cook's brother out there, James Cook. So it's hard to trust um, these guys in terms of who's actually going to score, right? For me, Stephon Diggs is their go-to guy. I know that he's been like not used as frequently. Um, I don't know. I don't know how much they really like needed to go to that well. I know Josh Allen's. I don't say he's been struggling recently, but weather hasn't been the greatest either in some of their games. Um, Diggs just makes a ton of sense to land in the box today. Now, whether he does or doesn't, this price is not right. Yeah, Greg, I'll be honest. I did the same thing. I was actually able to fortunate enough to get 43 and a half. So you probably did a 6 point tease offshore. But I got that same ticket as you, just at 43 and a half. So yeah, no, I like it a lot. That was where I fired. But yeah, I think the best pair, like I said, I have some PP money, or call it a half view of money on Chase to score. And to me, Diggs to score makes just so much sense. Obviously, a big game. I expect him to be getting a lot of ISO'd. And that's the other thing when you play teams like the Bills, you play teams like the Bengals, there's so many weapons that you just can't decide to take a player out of the game. You just can't do it. You just schematically can't do it. So I'd expect them to take a few red zone shots at Diggs. And of course, a guy that can score in any play. And plus 100, even better, Viper. Yeah, to me, Diggs makes a ton of sense. That line's 20 cents off on FanDuel. It's 25 cents off on MGM. DK's closer to it. I think DK's minus 120, so it's closer there. But yeah, Diggs hasn't landed in the box 3 weeks. Might even be longer than a month, I guess, pending when they played. Love the spot for Diggs. So yeah, that was where I fired. And I have the teaser as well. As far as the same game parlays, that's why I was asking in the chat. Do you guys screw around with same game parlays? Because happy to try to build you one that makes sense. And I wish it was kind of a segment that I was doing more often on this show. But like for me, so let's just flirt around with it, right? And to me, here's another thing, right? When you're building, oh, plus 105, wow. When you're building, what's up, Easy? Happy New Year. When you're building, it's even better price offshore, right? When you're building these same game parlays, always remember, like you're kind of building a game script, right? Like I think so many times, like people will do same game parlays, and there's just like a bunch of overs and like random unders. Like do it where you predict a script, right? So like for instance, if you're betting an under, right? If you're thinking, okay, tonight's going to be a night where the under comes through, right? In theory, you should probably be tagging in those under bets, field goals, over, right? You don't necessarily have to, but it's like semi-correlated, but not fully, so it won't totally impact your odds. Because in a world where you're going to bet an under, it's more than likely there's not going to be touchdowns if you win, right? And if there's not touchdowns, unless the game's going to have 0 points, there's going to be field goal attempts. So, and maybe you can be even less ballsy where you just bet over the attempts instead of the field goal makes. But if you're doing same game parlays and you're betting unders on totals, you should think about tagging field goals into your same game parlays, because it's also not going to kill it either, right? So like, I'll give you an example, right? So let's say you want to bet this under, but you want to tease it a bit, so you move it up, whatever it is, you move it up to 56 and a half, right? Minus 215. So ultimately you're paying 100 cents, you're paying a full dollar for to move it 6 points. Not crazy, all things considered. Let me just see here where the kick props are. Do they put the kick props in defensive props? No. Where the hell is the team scoring? Is it? Field goals? Is this where it goes on the team scoring? I always used to find field goals. Where the hell is field goals? Team total points. Maybe you guys would know more. Did they stop putting that would be a kick in the nuts. Did they stop putting field goals in these same game parlays? That would seem weird. Like I said, I don't do these enough, but you guys would probably know more. That does seem weird. Yeah, I guess I don't see it. I know FanDuel usually has it. That is so weird. All right. Well, anyway, just some food for thought. Most books, at least as of 6 months ago, were offering you the ability to bet field goals, whether they're over, under, field goal kickers, over, under. But the same thing, right, with a script, right? So let's give you another example. Let's say you think for whatever reason the Bills win by double digits today, right? The Bills win by double digits. You can bet separately receiver props over for Cincinnati because Joe Burrow, in that script specifically, Joe Burrow would be throwing a lot. Now, but you can't bet over like six different guys, right? Because that doesn't make sense. So you can just pick and choose guys that you'll bet their alternates. So, like for instance, maybe you do a same game parlay where you bet the Bills over their team total, right? Because in your game script there, the Bills are going to blow out the Bengals in the script we're just discussing, right? This is more, I could probably do this as a separate video, more of an evergreen video, but let's just say you like the Bills to blow out, right? So you go to Bills total points, and you bet their total points over, over 34 and a half. So over 34 and a half is plus 370, right? But in your theory, your idea is that the Bills are going to score over 34 and a half points. So for them to do that, how are they going to do that? They're going to do that by scoring touchdowns. So you just start plugging in one to two anytime touchdowns, right? So maybe Allen lands in the box and maybe Diggs lands in the box, right? The two of them, right? And you might be thinking, well, obviously you need all three things to happen, but it doesn't matter because the first part of your parlay, you need basically the Bills to score 4 touchdowns tonight, at least 4 touchdowns. And if they score 4 touchdowns, you can kind of intermingle who those 2 touchdowns or who those four touchdowns are. So now, just to give you a perfect idea, Bills over 34 and a half points, Josh Allen touchdown, Stephon Diggs touchdown. What do you guys think that pays? So you don't have to answer it, but it pays 10 to 1. 10 to 1. And here's the thing. With this script where you're just saying Bills are just going to do whatever the hell they want on offense, it's not crazy that this happens, but you can go the other way. So like you can also say, okay, well, if the Bills go over 34 and a half, the only way the Bengals are going to keep pace is if Joe Burrow is passing the football a ton, right? Now, maybe you can even give yourself some wiggle room in case it's a total blowout and they pull Burrow, which would be really hard to believe. But if the Bills are going to score 34 and a half points, that means the Bengals are going to be throwing a lot, very likely, right? So then you add in Joe Burrow over 274 and a half passing yards, right? So that takes it from 10 to 1. Actually, it only moves up to 11 to 1. It's nothing crazy. But so maybe you do something silly where, like if in DFS, if you did this, you would have to do what they call a run back, right? So bringing a player back on the other end because of the script, right? So maybe you say, you know what? The player I like in this script is Jamar Chase, and I'm going to bet him all the way over his max, which is 109.5. So if you add Jamar Chase into this at over 109 and a half receiving yards, this bet is now 22 to 1. 22 to 1. And it's a script that's conceivable, right? I think when you're doing this, if you're going to do same game parlays regularly, I'm being honest, if you're going to do them same game parlays regularly, and I know the odds do correlate a bit, but I promise you, create yourself scripts. So like if you're just betting one same game parlay every primetime game, like, yeah, you're trying to find lightning in a bottle. I'm not saying it's not going to work. I'm not saying it can't happen. My recommendation is, let's say for example, you were betting one $5 same game parlay every primetime game, right? My recommendation is bake 5 $1 same game parlays, okay? Because if you're doing that, you're at least giving yourself more options. And in those 5 same game parlays, what are you doing? You're creating correlated scripts. Now, if you're somebody that comes from the DFS side where you have to pick 6 players anyway, why not make sure all your same game parlays have 6 plays in them, or even specifically 6 players in them, right? Because if you were going to win anything in DFS anyway, you would need a really robust game from those 6 players. I mean, I wouldn't consider this, rocket science, right? Now, I personally don't dabble in this arena because I prefer to play DFS. But if you're somebody who bets anyway, to me, you give yourself a lot of upside. And it's actually, we all have different definitions of the word fun, but drawing up what these look like, dare I say, is kind of fun, maybe. So maybe there's a scenario where you think the Bengals blow out the Bills, right? So you kind of do the same thing. But instead of thinking Joe Burrow does it, you're like, I think it's going to be all on the ground. The whole game's going to be on the ground, right? So you go in, you go to the game lines, right? I think it's going to be a Bengals blowout. So you go Bengals over their max team total, which is what Bengals over is. So Bengals over their max total. Well, actually, you don't even have to, but 34 and a half, same like we did with the Bills, right? So that's 5 to 1 for the Bengals to score 34 points tonight. And And you're saying, okay, you know what? I don't think it's going to be Burrow. I think it's going to be the rushing game, right? So I think it's going to be Mixon. I think it's going to be Pirine getting extra work. So you go Pirine over his alternate yards. So think about this for a second, right? So, and then on the other end, since it's going to be a blowout and Buffalo's going to have to do what? They're going to have to pass, right? To at least try to keep the game somewhat relevant. So you go over to Josh Allen's pass numbers. You bet him over 279.5 yards. So I want to give you guys a quick example, right? So let's say, and this is only 4 that need to hit. So let's say you like the Bengals to control the game, right? Control clock, establish the ground game, run the ball effectively and well. And in doing so, they're going to give themselves a lead, eat up a lot of clock, whatever you want to describe it as, right? So Bengals over 34.5 total points. Joe Mixon over 74.5 rush yards. Samaje Perine over 35 rush yards or 35 or more rush yards for Perine. And then Josh Allen over 279.5 pass yards. That parlay pays 55 to 1. 55 to 1. And again, it's a game script that's conceivable, right? Because it's all correlated. The idea is that Cincinnati runs the football effectively. Joe Burrow doesn't have to do a lot. Now, contrary to this, you can turn around and then also bet Joe Burrow under his pass yard, right? If you wanted, because this kind of fits the whole narrative. The problem is that his I don't know what that even means. You pick couldn't be removed. Saying that wrong? I don't even fucking know. And it won't even let me add it for whatever reason. I need to be in a required state. I don't know what it's talking about. Okay, so anyway, you don't have to add a Burrow, but you can add Burrow. But again, the logic is always the same when you're building these parlays. Look at it like you're building an entire script for how the game's going to play out. Don't just make it random shit like, oh, I think this is going to be a Jamar Chase night, so we're just only going to stick with Jamar Chase. We're going to play Jamar Chase in every same game parlay. No. And also, use the alternates to your advantage because you can middle yourself, right? So, like, for instance, let's say you think Chase is going to have a decent game. You think Higgins is going to have a decent game. You can toggle their over and unders, and you give yourself, what do you give yourself? I'm trying to look at some of these. So if you go to receiving props for these players, right? It's like a Jamar Chase, right? If you bet his over at the lowest number and his under at the highest number, there's 40 yards of gap there. They let you go from 69.5 to 109.5. So in theory, in your builds where you think Jamar Chase has a decent game or a good game, you can bet it over 69.5 at minus 190. And in your scripts where you don't think the passing game works effectively for the Bengals, you can bet them under 110 yards. Or, like I said, you can just kind of go all out and do it a separate way. But again, you're really just looking for just scripts, right? Just scripts that make sense and are different. If you're somebody, I know a lot of people do this, right? Where you build your one same game parlay a week, right? Or a game, a slate, whatever. Just separate it out. Build 5, make them correlated in certain ways, right? Scripted in certain ways, and go from there. I think even the same thing could be said for the defensive end, right? Like in a game, I mean, I guess it is a little still random, right? But even in a game that you think is going to go low scoring, why not add a scoreless quarter into your same game parlay, right? I don't even know if a lot of people even know if that's an option. I mean, yeah, just add a scoreless quarter or add a team to have a scoreless quarter, right? So yeah, just some food for thought there. But yeah, overall for this game, that was kind of where I'm at. Right? The same game parlay. And I know it's kind of chalky, but to me it doesn't matter. These things have been good all year. So Buffalo wins, San Diego 100 yards and a touchdown, 750. So I'll tell you this, Joe. I'm just trying to think on what mathematically that line should be, right? Because if Diggs, even if mathematically I have Diggs 130 to score, and so Diggs 100 yards, that can't be. That's got to be big dog money. Diggs on 100 yards. Let me just look at what it is on DraftKings. So Diggs, yeah. So Diggs 100 yards is over 2-1. So you'd be parlaying a 2-1, with a minus 130. 2-1 with a minus 130 with a. Actually, you know what? I'm interested in what that looks like. Let me take all these out. What the fuck? Might have to refresh the page, because I actually think, because if you did a 3-team parlay, it would pay 6-1 standard. I would actually think, as silly as it sounds, Joe, I don't know if that's good value at 750. But here's the thing: I could build it for you quick. Tell you at least where DraftKings would value that, right? So if I go receiving, we go Diggs 200. Where is it, Diggs? So Diggs 200, Buffalo money line, and what Diggs to score, right? Oh wow, yeah, that can't be right. That is really odd. I guess they consider because 100 yards he probably scores. So I'll be honest then. Look, even DK has it 550, 750's got to be decent value, Joe. Whether that bet hits or not, it's got to be decent value. I forgot the correlation between a player scoring and a player having that many receiving yards because there's obviously just a better chance of them landing in the box if they take in that many receiving yards. And of course, you also have the same player that goes over 100 yards and one team wins. I will tell you this: the books do this in a negative way, right? So, like for instance, we just did it, right? So Diggs 100 yards, Diggs to score, Buffalo money line, right? And that paid plus 550. I'm interested if I turn around and instead of doing that, I go Jamar Chase over his max and Jamar Chase to score because I would think this would pay better odds. So this pays 700. So it pays an extra 150 odds. And I'll be honest, like to me, again, if you think one team wins anyway, that means the other team's going to be throwing to try to continue to keep pace, right? I mean, unless there's a weird script where one team leads most of the game instead of all. But anyway, just wanted to give you overall food for thought on how to, better build your same game parlays. Because I know like now these are becoming like super trendy. If they haven't already, I mean, which they are, but they're more trendy now than they've ever been. So again, you use that kind of stuff to your advantage. So yeah, all right. Just to wrap up, favorite touchdown for me of the game is definitely Diggs. I think most books have him 20, 25 cents off. I'm not gonna be one of those guys that tells you it's just going to be a Diggs scoring fest all night. No, just saying the number's wrong. Diggs hasn't scored in 3 straight games. He loves to get Allen loves to go his way, especially in these big games. And look, what better game to build Stephon Diggs' confidence than a game like this and a spot like this? So I think he's mispriced by about 20 cents, which makes sense to fire. Jamar Chase plus 115 is another wrong price. That should be even money. So took the 15 cents. Again, I know it's going to be your quote unquote chalky, but love the spot. And the teaser, right? So Bengals up through 8.5 and the over 43.5. Look, if this game ends 17-14 or, 27-10, something like that, I mean, so be it. But even 27-10, you're still only 5 points away, 6 points away. Like, so anyway, um, no hard stance for me where the Cincinnati wins, Buffalo wins. I mean, look, I will tell you this just based on my own bias. Joe Burrow does not lose these types of games, and Josh Allen seems to lose every one of these types of games. So take that for what it's worth. Maybe you can, wait live. Maybe Buffalo goes up big or 10 or 13, and then you can live bet Cincy. Either way, both teams should be able to dig themselves out of a hole, regardless. Two explosive offenses. It should be a fun game, right? One of the best games on Monday Night Football this season. And then look, we look forward to next week. No more Thursday Night Football, so it'll just be a loaded 2 Saturday games, I think, and then the rest Sunday with the late game on Sunday night with the Packers and the Lions, which to me, I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, but yes, if the Seahawks do lose, the Lions have nothing to play for. Not to say they won't play for anything, but they don't have anything to play for. So needless to say, should be a fun week overall, right? Minnesota's got to hold their own. The Philly's got to survive a complete plane crash if if they somehow end up losing 3 straight and Cowboys Niners win 3 straight to give them a worse seed. So either way, all good stuff all around. What's up, Cold? What's up, Joe? But with all that said, I hope you all gamble responsibly, stay safe. I know most of the population in general will be going back to work tomorrow, back to your regular grind. So look, I wish you the best of luck with all that. And as always, look, as for content for me this week, this is the week where I start picking up college basketball a lot more. So sparingly bet it about 2 weeks ago before the bowl started, or 3 weeks ago before the bowl started. But yeah, it'll be back full in the swing. And look, tennis, right? Australian Opens end of the month. So definitely get back on the tennis grind. And I used to play Prize Picks a ton. Of course, easy. I used to play Prize Picks a ton when they were one of our vendors or sponsors for Rump here. I could actually not play, gave out. I'm not legally allowed to bet it in New Jersey. But yeah, it was really good. I want to say over we have the track sheets, but over like a sample size of 250 bets. I think I was up like 28 or 29 units. I did a lot of the power and flex plays, where if I like to play, I'd always bet a power and a flex for it, which made it more forgiving. And also, the Prize Picks numbers are just relatively soft. The way Prize Picks makes money is, of course, all their lines are basically minus 130s. So they're basically able to they're basically able to add 20 cents of vig than a sports book would for a similar type play. And their parlays pay less, right? Like even their 3-team powers or their 3-team, like they all pay less than a standard sports book. So that's how they make their money. But there's definitely a ton of soft lines there. So I hope you've been making yourself some money there, Dan. All right. Folks, good luck tonight. Could be a fun game. Hope you're watching it, whether it's solo, friends, family, whatever it is. Hope you're enjoying it. And yeah, we'll be back. I'll be back either, definitely not tomorrow, but probably Wednesday with a vid. Maybe I'll join my dad. We'll see what happens. But yeah, look, until then, stay safe, gamble responsibly. As always, run pure, folks. See you guys in a few days.